Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So as always, we're going to take a look at the freight market to see how things have changed. And we're going to take a look at volume, rejection, capacity, diesel prices, and then we'll go into specifics on the spot market for dry vans, reefers, and flatbeds. But as you could probably already tell from the title of this video, today we're going to be taking a deeper dive into capacity. I want to show you guys a chart that I have found regarding capacity, and at the end of the video, we're going to really talk about what is going on and what FreightWaves is saying is going on. Ready? Let's go. All right, as always, all the charts are going to be attached right here. So let's quickly go through this. General overview. In general, the market volume has increased by almost 6% week over week. As you can see, this is not the spot market. This is the general volume. Rejection rates have also increased by 2.56% and currently are sitting around the 6% mark. Now, when we look at the spot market, and this is data that is comparing last week to the week before, spot volumes have actually gone down by 2.74%, and spot rates have also seen a decrease by about 1 cent per mile on average if we take all the different equipment types. All right, let's take a look at diesel prices. Right away, I'm going to tell you every single state has experienced an increase in diesel prices at the pump. And you can see the lighter an area, the cheaper the diesel. But the plus signs, Oregon, Indiana, Delaware, South Carolina, and Florida, those are the top 5 that experienced the biggest increases in diesel prices. Now, if we take a look at diesel price minus IFTA to see the raw price of diesel, Illinois still is the cheapest if we take IFTA out of the equation, and the West Coast and the Northeast are still the most expensive. Now, speaking of diesel prices, it shouldn't come as a surprise if you have been following the news. Diesel prices have seen an increase on average. On a national level, week over week, they're up about 12 cents per gallon, month over month, about 17, 18 cents per gallon, but year over year, down about 8 cents per gallon. All right, let's get into capacity, starting with the net change in carrier population. This is calculated by taking how many carriers come in versus how many carriers leave and seeing what the net change is. We are seeing, as of this week, the biggest net drop in carrier population since January. We have lost 325 carriers net. The white line is as close to zero as I could get it, and the zero would mean that there are the same amount of carriers coming in as going out. As you can see, we lost 325 carriers. However, what is really interesting is this chart right here, which is net revocations, and this is voluntary or involuntary. It doesn't discriminate how many people shut down their companies or were forced to do so. What you're going to see is since December of 2024, that number is going up. So this whole year, the amount of carriers who have been closing or were forced to close down their authorities has been increasing. We'll talk about capacity at the end of this video. All right, let's go into specifics. Spot market, starting with dry van. So this is for the week ending on June 20th. Dry van saw a 1 cent per mile decrease on average on the spot market. Rates year over year are 2% lower. Volumes also saw a drop for dry vans, 1.3% down, and they are 6% lower than this time last year. So this is a volume map that I make using truck stop data, which shows you where most loads come out from for dry vans. And as you can see, the darker an area, the more loads come out of that area. Pretty much the same as always: California, Texas, the South, and the Midwest, as well as some of the East Coast, not the Northeast though. Now let's take a look at load to truck ratios for dry vans using truck stop data, and then we'll compare it to the DAT heat map. Anything that is a shade of red, as a reminder, is overcapacity. It's just the lighter it is, the less overcapacity it is, but it's still overcapacity. Yellow is equilibrium, about 1 to 2 loads per truck. And the light green, Mississippi and South Carolina, this is 2 to 2.52 loads per truck. Let's take a look at the MCI index by DAT, which shows you how many searches are done, right? How many times a broker searches for a truck versus how many times a driver searches for a load. The more red it is, the more tight the capacity is, so it's better for carriers. And what we can see for dry vans is that Southern California, Texas, right, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, Houston, as well as pretty much the South and the Southeast, those are places where brokers are always searching for trucks, often more so than carriers are searching for loads. And you can see that the West Coast, the Plain States, they are dead, and the Northeast as well. It's completely blue, which means that there are not enough loads, not enough searches from brokers for trucks. They're not even trying to find anything. They're not competing for anything. Yeah, it's not a good area to be in. All right, let's take a look at reefers. Reefers, unfortunately, also saw decreases across the board. They saw the rate per mile fall by about 3 cents per mile week over week. Year over year rates are 3% lower, unfortunately. Volumes did not change at all. However, year over year, they are 14% lower on the spot market. All right, volumes. Where are those volumes for reefers? According to TruckStop, Texas, California, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, followed by Illinois, North Carolina, and Florida, those are the places where you're going to find more loads for reefers on the spot market. But what about load to truck ratios? Well, you can see the Northeast, the Pacific Northwest, the Plain States, not good areas to be. The Midwest is also not good. You can see it's a shade of red. When we look at load to truck ratios, right, how many loads versus how many trucks, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, South Dakota, and North Dakota are the ones that show promise. And the reason I'm using air quotes here is because it really can be skewed sometimes. North Dakota is a place that doesn't have loads. It's just if there are, for example, 3 loads there and 1 truck, yeah, it's going to show you a pretty good load to truck ratio. Delaware sees the highest load to truck ratio, 5.93 loads per truck, but it's surrounded by overcapacity. Delaware is very small, so even if there are 5 loads per truck there, you do not see it in rates because everyone is deadheading from Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, sometimes Connecticut and New York as well. What about the MCI index on DAT? So on that, you can see that Southern California, Southeast, the Fort Worth, Dallas area, Missouri, specifically around Joplin, Missouri, I would say. These are places where brokers search for trucks more than trucks search for loads. But yeah, what surprises me about reefers is how dead the Washington and Oregon areas are, especially during this time of year. Very, very interesting. All right, let's take a look at those flatbeds. Flatbeds also saw pretty much decreases across the board, except for one data point. Week over week, they saw a decrease of 1 cent per mile on the load board in terms of rates. Year over year rates are 0.2% lower, unfortunately. Volumes also fell by almost 4% week over week. However, volumes are 26% higher than this time last year. All right, let's take a look at volumes. So volumes, most of the loads come out of Texas as well as the South for flatbeds. As you can see, the darker an area, the more loads come out of that area. So let's take a look at load to truck ratios. Yeah, for the most part, everything is over capacity, although as always, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama have severe undercapacity, with Mississippi having almost 10 loads per truck. And as a reminder, again, the reason for this is because not a lot of loads go to Mississippi. So you don't get as much capacity there, but you do have a lot of loads there, which creates the skewed market to the carrier's favor. All right, what about the MCI index? It pretty much matches the load to truck ratio mapped Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. This is where brokers are constantly looking for trucks. Southern California as well. Something to be careful of. This is something that I have learned this week because we ended up in Georgia at one point. Georgia is a very hot market for flatbeds. The only thing is it's hot if you are willing to go somewhere like Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, so somewhere in the East Coast. If you're looking to go from Georgia to a place like Dallas, the rates are not going to be as great because capacity, for the most part, even the limited capacity compared to loads that there is, they're competing for loads going to the south. All right, I know that I went through the charts pretty quickly, at least I felt like I kind of sped through it, but that's because I want to talk about capacity. Something that we have seen that we have not seen before is that even though the net change in carrier population is not showing much promise, we see that this whole year, the amount of people who have been exiting this industry has been increasing. More specifically, according to FreightWaves, the pace of exits is 16% higher than during the same period in 2024. The reason we have not been seeing this in the net change is because the amount of authorities issued, the new authorities, has also been increasing this year. However, according to FreightWaves, and I quote, "New authorities have stumbled in recent weeks as new enforcement behaviors and processes may be creating additional barriers to entry," which also explains why this week's chart shows a decrease in net carriers by 325 carriers net, I believe it was. Now, the question is, where is capacity still popping up? Well, let me give you some statistics. This year alone, there were 26,394 new motor carrier authorities issued by the FMCSA. Now, if we take a look at location, and FreightWaves took the month of May as an example, most of those authorities pop up in Fresno, California. And according to FreightWaves, there is a rising pattern of one-and-done fleets, ghost fleets. As FreightWaves states, and I quote, "They file, run for a few months under one DOT number, then vanish, sometimes popping back up later under a different MC." Now, do these one-and-done fleets even count as capacity? Because I don't know. Considering the fact that brokers are very, very strict about who they work with, and considering the fact that the FMCSA has started to really crack down on new entrants, I don't know if they count. In April of this year, the FMCSA started rolling out a full facial recognition and ID upload requirement for new entrants. The result, I'm going to give you some numbers. So in March, 60 to 65% of applicants were able to finish getting their authority. So they went through their whole application process and were able to complete that application. In April, once the facial recognition and ID upload has been rolled out, 30% of applicants were able to finish the process. So as FreightWaves states, half of all applications failed to advance past the FMCSA's screening to the Federal Register published stage. Now, I'm going to further quote FreightWaves. Looking ahead, this verification will also extend outward to existing carriers who need to renew their government forms. Existing carriers will also have to undergo verification when they update their info, with about 800,000 current registrants eventually needing to verify identity as well. So let me know what you make of this. What do you think will end up happening with capacity, considering the crackdown of the FMCSA now on new authorities as well as eventually on existing authorities? Do you think there will still be those one and done fleets, or will they start decreasing? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts and would love to hear how your week went. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week and weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.